Welcome to the Power Factor Show. Episode 160. Sponsored by Taylor Freelance, Rainier Ballistics, Hodgson Powders, and JPL Precision.
Hey Power Factor fans, I'm Rick. I want to take care of a little housekeeping. We had a trivia question some episodes back now, and it's been a while. In fact, I'd forgotten what the question was, but we looked it up and I figured out what it was, and we actually had chosen a winner. And the question was that with the new IDPA rulebook that took effect October 1st, 2013, the weight limits for custom defensive pistol, enhanced service pistol, and stock service pistol and stock service revolver had all become a consistent 43 ounces. It used to be each division had its own separate weight limit, but they've gone consistently across the board except for one division. And which division is that? And the answer is enhanced service revolver, which has now, I think, always had a 50 ounce weight limit. And of course, everybody who answered the trivia question got the answer right, but we can't give out a prize to everyone, even though everyone is equally deserving. And the big winner of, I believe, is a Starline brass certificate is John Seeley. So John, congratulations. Contact us via Gmail or whatever, give us some shipping info, and we'll get your prize out to you. And thanks everybody for playing. Hey Power Factor fans, I'm Rick, and we have been asking people over the last year or two to submit course of fire designs for us to evaluate, critique, tear apart on the air. And we haven't got a huge amount of response, but we've got a few, and so I'm just going to go through them, kind of checking them for, are they legal, are they practical, just little things like that. And if you're interested in stage design, there are a lot of little wrinkles that have to do not just with legality, but also with practicality. Things like, you know, is it an equal challenge or close to being equal challenge for people who are shooting different divisions and whatnot, although the divisions aren't competing head to head. If it's radically different for one group than another, it kind of changes the nature of the stage. So just little things like that. I'm just going to go through the stage, you know, the written procedure and the requirements and whatnot, and just kind of critique, explain, and let's get to it. This stage is called ATM Gangbangers. The scenario, you're withdrawing money from an ATM. Suddenly, an assailant appears on your left and says, "Give me that cash or you're dead." At extreme close quarters, you judge your knife the best option. As you turn to run, you see three more thugs moving quickly towards you. You engage them with your firearm while retreating to cover. Course of fire, 10 rounds minimum. Vickers scoring. Start position is at A, with gun holstered, both hands on the ATM with a concealed knife. At buzzer, engage T1 with the knife, one stab to the heart. Draw and engage T2 with 2 rounds. While backing up toward position B, engage T3, T4, and T5 in tactical sequence. One shot in each target before second shot in each target in any order, with 2 rounds each. Avoid the innocent pedestrian. Reload behind cover. Engage T6 with 2 rounds from around the left side of tall cover, which in the drawing it could be a barricade or just a wall that's upright, so it's taller than it is wide. So I had a few questions about this, concerns about it. You start the stage with a knife, and you stab T1 to the heart, which I'm going to guess is like the down 0 zone. So my question is, A, do you score the target that's being stabbed? There's nothing in the rules about scoring a target that's been, you know, engaged any way other than with gunfire. You score round bullet holes. Stabbing the target, if you're going to score that stab, yes, you stabbed it in the heart, or no, you didn't stab it in the heart. I'm not really sure that you can do that within the IDPA rules. So I'd like to see some kind of clarification on exactly how that part of the stage was run. If is it a yes or no kind of a thing? If I don't go through the motion of stabbing, it's a 3-second procedural, or how's that going to work? We also have the procedure seems to indicate that T2 is engaged from a stationary position, while T3, 4, and 5 are engaged while moving. Why would you say engage the nearest target while stationary and then start backing away from the more distant targets? If you have a cover position available at B, shouldn't you be moving towards it for everything? I mean, if you're in this position where you're in trouble and you're trying to get out of it, it seems to me you'd want to start moving as soon as your attention has been drawn to T2. The next concern is that you have 8 shots required before you reach a position where you can reload. So anybody who's shooting a revolver or a small capacity auto pistol is going to run their gun dry before they reach B. And there should be an allowance in the stage description for what do those people do who run dry. Now, normally, the normal situation would be after you've arrived at B, you're allowed to re-engage the targets that could not be engaged while moving. That's been addressed in the new rule book. I think it's rule 3 in the 3.8, 3.9. If you look in that area in the rule book, it addresses running, reloading after you've run your gun dry, re-engaging targets after you've arrived at cover. So I would probably put something in the procedure that says engage these targets while moving to B. If you run your gun dry on the way, you may initiate your reload while moving, but you can't continue engaging or re-engage until you've arrived at B. And you can't re-engage until you've completed your reload at B. You're not allowed to engage while moving, perform a reload, and then re-engage while moving. Once your gun is dry, you must go to the next shooting position to complete your reload. So I would just put something in the procedure to let the shooter know what their not the options, but what the requirements are if they run their gun dry. Also, the illustration shows T3, T4, and T5 in kind of this echelon pattern where T3 is closer to the shooting position than T4, and T4 is closer than T5. It says in the procedure in any order, but if that offsetting of the targets is by 6 feet or more, you must, under the umbrella of tactical priority, engage the closest target first, then the next most distant target, then the next most distant target, and you're not allowed to mix tactical sequence and tactical priority on the same stage. So if the targets are T3, 4, and 5 are going to be arranged the way they appear in this drawing, the distance between T3 and the shooting position must be less than 6 feet difference between T3, T4, and then 6 feet difference between 4 and 5, or you'll put the shooter in a position where tactical priority says you must engage the nearest target, but the rule book says you can't engage in tac sequence and tactical priority. So I would suggest either putting T3, T4, and T5 all at an equal distance, which means then you are allowed, without specifying it, to engage in any order. Or if you are going to put them at this kind of an angled echelon type formation, make sure that there's obviously less than 6 feet difference between T3 and T4, and less than 6 feet difference in T4 and T5, so that everybody's aware that there is no requirement that they be shot near to far as well as in tactical sequence. It's kind of a cool stage, though. I do like it, but I would like to see kind of resolve the issues with how do you score stabbing. Are you actually scoring the stab hole, or is it just a matter of a 3-second procedural if you don't do it? And then why, if we're backing away from T3, T4, and T5, why aren't we backing away from T2? That's just more like kind of a strategy thing. But you also have a rule requirement that says if there's cover, you have to use it. I don't know if that extends all the way into if it's there, you have to be moving towards it. But it's a question I would just kind of have from the rules enforcement, and kind of tactics are involved. Why would I stand flat-footed to engage T2 and then start moving? But other than that, ATM gangbangers. Looks like fun.
Hi, welcome to Power Factor. I'm Larry, and this is another installment in a series of start positions, mostly with the USPSA focus, but you can apply this to IDPA, I believe. So let's get started. So oftentimes you'll see a seated start position usually at a table, and that's why we got the table here. So I guess first of all, what is seated? So your written stage briefing, you need to go to your written stage briefing specific to that stage that tells you what do they define as being seated. Oftentimes you will see something that says that your knees have to be under the table and that your back needs to be against the back of the chair. That's one version of it anyway. So as a range officer, when a competitor has prepared the gun, whether it's a table start or whether it's a holstered start, but the firearm is ready to go, the shooter assumes the start position, I will walk around to the side and sight just visually down the front plane of the table. If it says knees have to be under the table, make sure that you cannot see any light between this kind of imaginary plane and the shooter's legs. If you cannot, if the knees are just barely underneath, then that's good to go. The next thing is, does your back have to be against the back of the chair or not? And if it does, then this just simply looks like this. Where the hands go, again, that's depending on the written stage briefing. Sometimes it's on marks on the table. Sometimes it's on your knees. Sometimes it's fingers interlaced behind your head. So you just kind of have to do whatever this written stage briefing tells you to do. But now, what if it's not very specific? How would you satisfy your seated start? Well, if you don't have to put your back against the chair, I recommend that you don't. It's a lot harder to get up if you're leaning back. You know, you kind of want to be leaning forward if you can, ready to launch out of your position, whatever that is, wherever you have to go. So first of all, the seated part. We at our club use the one cheek rule, and that's kind of really is if you're not falling on the ground, then the chair is supporting you. So, you know, I mean, turn your chair if you're allowed to. If it doesn't specifically tell you what to do, get that chair so you are as free from that chair as you possibly can be. So right now, I mean, I'm obviously not falling on the ground, so the chair is supporting me, so I am seated. Where the hands go, again, it kind of depends on the written stage briefing, but if it doesn't say, I'll put one hand on the chair, one hand on my leg, and get my strong side foot underneath me, ready to launch out of this position if I have a run, if I don't have a table in front of me, an obstacle. But even if I do, I mean, I want to get up as quickly as I can. So I want to be able to push off with both hands and my strong side leg as I get up. Now, what about shooting? When it comes to shooting, are you going to shoot seated or are you going to shoot standing? I generally like to shoot standing because that's what we're used to doing. And twisting your body, you're reacting against your feet typically. Your legs should be driving your body from side to side. So I prefer to stand. So in order to stand up, how do we stand up? Well, I mean, it sounds kind of mundane to think about, but I mean, for one thing, I like to make sure that my feet, I don't know if you can see, my feet are outside of the chair legs. And I like my feet to be kind of underneath, you know, back a little bit. So here my legs are underneath the table, as if it tells me I have to be, but I like my feet to be outside the chair like this, so that when I stand up, my knees will naturally pop this chair out of the way as I stand to shoot. So I recommend doing that every time if you can. And one reason you can't maybe is if you've got fault lines that are right on the edge of the chair and you just can't get your feet outside the fault lines before the start buzzer. So that might force you to do otherwise. But I would recommend doing that. Now, so what about shooting now? So are we going to shoot seated or are we going to stand up? Well, like I say, I like to stand up if I can. But if this stage is, there are certain things that they can do to force you to sit down. For example, if the targets are low and you're shooting, if you've got some kind of hardcover, if you've got some kind of no shoot that encourages you to be low, then you might want to go ahead and shoot from your seated position. If there's wide transitions, just expect that it's going to take you a little bit longer to transition from target to target when you're seated. It just takes a little bit longer to do that. If it's a very short stage, that's another reason why you might want to shoot seated. If you've got 6 rounds and the stage is over, standing up might take a little bit more time, especially if all shots are straight down range and you don't have transitions to deal with that are going to add time. Then seated, boom, 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 if I got 6 rounds or 8 rounds, I don't have to do any magazine changes or anything like that. If I just have 6 or 8 rounds and they're mostly straight down range, I might just go ahead and shoot seated because it does take time if you're going to stand up. Another reason why you might want to stand up, which I just kind of touched on, is if the stage is long enough that you have to do magazine changes, you're not accustomed to pulling mags off your belt generally when you're seated. Some of us have some pronounced guts that get in the way sometimes when we're seated, and it's a little bit more difficult to get to the mags that way. So think about that as well. If you're going to be doing mag changes, try and stand up at some point during the shooting process. I mean, I generally like to stand, and as I'm standing, I'm shooting, and then so that by the time my first magazine is empty, then I'm standing by that point and I'm ready to do my reload. So that's a tip for you there. Now, what about, let's see. So from a match director's point of view, if you want to force your shooters to be seated, we kind of touched on that already too. What can you do to force your shooters to shoot seated? Well, you could just write it down and say these shots will be shot from a seated position. But you could do it a little more creatively than that, and I've seen stages where right on the table they've built like a 12-inch high port, a little frame, and all shots must pass through the port. Well, now, you have to be down to get all your shots to fire through that port. So that's another creative way to get your competitors to shoot from a seated position. Let's talk about a couple of pitfalls real quick. Loaded seated starts. That is a big pet peeve of mine. That's when you've got a loaded gun in the holster and the shooter is seated. As a match director, I will never allow that start position, and as a stage designer, I will never write that start position into my stages. And the reason being is you've seen, if you've been around USPSA matches, you've seen the race-style bikini holsters that only have the trigger guard like this held in the holster, and the rest of the gun is completely exposed. Now, there are many models that have a muzzle cup where the holster body continues down, and there's just a little bit of a cup or a post with a little button that kind of goes up in the barrel to keep that from wiggling too bad, keep the gun in position. But some of them don't have that. Some of them only hold the gun by the trigger guard. And so what can happen, and I've seen it done, and I've seen it happen, and this is the reason why I never will allow that if I'm in charge. But what happens is the shooter gets his gun ready, holsters, and then the thigh will push up on the gun and pop it out of the holster. Where those holsters are really good, they're really designed so the gun cannot come out this way. The gun cannot come out to any side. It cannot come out forward. It's only designed to release the gun upward. So when you've got the gun here and you're only holding it by the trigger guard, and a guy gets it all loaded up and pops it in the holster and goes to sit down, and then boom, the muzzle gets bumped by the thigh and the gun comes out. And that has happened to people that I know, and it happened at the first match that I ever attended, where we had this, $4,000 SV Infinity gun, all, super nice looking high-end gun with a nice holster and everything else. And this guy was an experienced shooter sitting in a folding chair just like this. That's exactly what happened. The gun tumbles out, and it's got a 1.5 pound trigger or whatever. The gun tumbles out, and it's pointed directly uprange. And luckily, all the safeties worked and stayed engaged. But that's something that I don't like, and I want to minimize the potential for that happening. And so, like I said, if I'm in charge of a match, I don't allow that start position, and that's why. So that's something to look out for. Speaking to the match directors out there, I recommend just not allowing that. If you're going to have a loaded, seated start, make it a table start, and then you're safe. You're good to go. So there's one more pitfall I want to have you guys watch out for, and this is somewhat comical, and I see it happen all the time. And so what we have is a seated start. So a shooter comes up and he gets in his position. He's got his back against the chair, just like he's supposed to, and he's got his knees under the table or whatever. And so he's ready to go. The gun's on the table. In my match, the gun's going to be on the table if you're seated. And start buzzer goes off. And what happens? The chair comes with him. So I've seen it before. It's hilarious. And it happens, of course, to the production shooters and single stack shooters that have limited and limited 10 shooters. You've got limited capacity of your magazines. So you've got, 6 magazines or 8 magazines. And if you're somewhat of a skinny guy, like I kind of used to be, your magazines are wrapping around almost back to the holster. And so you've got magazines at the small of your back. And it was kind of somewhat hard for me to get in that position with this chair. But some chairs, it's just there's a bigger gap there, and it's easier for that to happen. So that's something else for you to watch out for. If you're a production shooter, if you're an L10 shooter, single stack shooter, you've got magazines all the way behind you, and you probably do because, well, maybe not with L10, but with production and single stack, everything has to be behind your hip bone. So it starts here and it wraps around. Now, luckily, I've got this quad mag pouch here from CompTac. Not a sponsor, but I do like the product. And so that helps bunch up my magazines a bit to move them forward a little bit to prevent some of that. But, as you see, I've got two spare mags back here. Once I exhaust this pouch, I come back here for my 5th mag, and I come back here again for my 6th mag. So just a little pitfall for you to watch out for on your seated start position. All right, thanks again for watching this week's installment on USPSA start positions. I hope you're learning something, and please interact with us on Facebook and YouTube. We've made a New Year's resolution to be more interactive with our viewers on our Facebook page. So that's facebook.com/PowerFactorShow. I want to thank K-Rounds again. We had K-Rounds on the show many episodes back. I'm using the K-Rounds holster today in this episode with my Beretta. If you'd like a speed rig for your production gun, just give them a call and ask for the Leone speed rig, the Power Factor Show Leone speed rig. They'll know what you're talking about. So thanks again to those guys for their support. And check them out if you haven't seen them. K-Rounds holsters. They're on Facebook as well. So we've got a trivia question this week for you. And this is going to be an easy one. What is the diameter of the calibration zone of a full-size popper in USPSA? A popper is a steel target, as you know. It's hinged at the bottom, so it falls over when you hit it. It's a tall, skinny target with a round zone near the top. So the question this week is, what is the diameter of the calibration zone of that full-size popper? If you know the answer, send the answer to our email at powerfactorshow@gmail.com. Again, check us out on Facebook, like us on Facebook. We are getting more interactive with the viewers on there, and it's been going rather well. And everybody seems to be responding and having a good conversation. That's what we like. We want a little back and forth with you guys. So again, check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/powerfactorshow. Our website's powerfactorshow.com. And these trivia questions do have prizes attached. So get your answer in. And the rules, again, if you forgot, the rule is from the time we ask the question until the time the next episode comes out, we've got 1 week. And all the correct answers that come in within that week are eligible to win. We'll select randomly from all the correct answers. We've got Taylor Freelance products. We've got Ben Stager's last book, his fundamental techniques and competition skills that we reviewed on the show. Looking forward to his next book as well, which is now out. So we're going to be reviewing that sometime soon. We've got hats from Northwest Safe. We've got gift certificates. We've got all kinds of stuff that were donated from our supporters. So thanks again to all our sponsors. And thanks to you guys for listening and watching. And we'll see you next week.